Okay, question, should we test the mic? Not sure if they hear me. Let's see if they can hear me. Our mic is off over here. Testing, testing. Okay, we are good to go. Today's daf is Kuf Samach Gimel, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, gewaltig. So yesterday we talked about the last line of a star is never focused on, and therefore you should only write in the last line a repeat of what was done until what was said until then. We discussed that if there's two lines blank, you can fix it by putting in names of Krovim, and it's no different than by schach. If you leave if you leave airspace, it will be possible at 3 tvachim, but if you have schach possible, you have until 4 tvachim. Okay, so zok the hele gemara weiter. I just wanted to share that today is the yahrzeit of two very special people who we rely on almost every day. Today is the yahrzeit of the Marsha. He always helps us understand the Gemaras. And today is also the yahrzeit of our Baruch Ber, the famous Baruch Ber Leibowitz from Kamenetz. And there's an interesting story about him. You know, he wasn't just a regular Litvish guy. He was very into holiness and things. And there was a story where he came to America to raise money, and one of the Gevirim gave him an apartment to stay in. And he opened up the window of his apartment, and he saw right across the street, there was a tumah there, there was a church. And he was very, very uncomfortable because he said, how could I learn? How could I daven? How could I do Avodah Hashem when there's a tumah in front of me? So someone told him over the famous story with the position of Melech. You know the famous story where they were in jail and the guard Vidavka didn't want him to be able to daven, so he put like a pail with excrement in there, and they started dancing. And they said the same Rebbeinu Shalom who normally wants us to daven, today he doesn't want us to daven. So today we could be Mekai Menu mitzvah of not davening to do a mitzvah to the Rebbeinu Shalom. And they were dancing, and when the guard saw that they're so happy, he realized his plan didn't work. So what are you dancing for? So he said, because now we have the mitzvah. So he ended up taking it away. So when Baruch Ber was told that story, he felt much better. Okay, Zok the Gemara. The two lines that we said that if you left blank, two lines, the star is automatically invalidated. What exactly does it mean? Hein va'aviran, adil mahein v'lo yavir. There's the actual place where the line is written, but normally you leave a space before and after each line. So does it include that? So if you have two lines just of writing, but two lines that you could have just written in that were left blank, but you didn't leave the extra space that it would take a real two lines because you would leave spaces in between, is that considered big enough of a gap that would passel the star? Amr Nachman Bar Yitzchak mistavro dehein va'avira. Pashtus means the way you would normally write, meaning you would also leave a blank line. Because if you're going to learn that it just means the space of the line itself, but not the space for the avir, it would be possible even if you left such a small little gap looking into the Bach. The Bach doesn't change anything. Shita achas v'lo yavira l'may chazer. You couldn't write anything in one line if it didn't have the extra space. Why, Dr. Rashbam? Because you would be forced to write very, very small, as the Rashbam says. It would be obvious that this isn't the normal text of the star. You'd have to write anything in that line much, much smaller in a much smaller font. Because there has to be a little bit of a blank line, a blank space between the line above and the line below. That means your font is going to be much smaller. And therefore, it will be obvious that this was added in. And if you're going to write large letters, then it'll be even more obvious that this is not proper. Because there will be no spacing in between the lines. Ella, Shemamina, Hein Vavir and Shemamina. It obviously means that the only time there's a chash of ziyuf, and therefore the shtar is possible, if two lines are left blank, that's only if not only are two lines left blank, but the space in between the lines that are normally left. In other words, you look at the normal spacing of the shtar, and that's the size of the two lines that have to be left. This that we said, that two lines of blank space will possible, we're going to correct what I said a moment ago. What I said a moment ago is you leave over a line and the space, or the amount of spaces that have to be left over together with the line of writing, you have to leave over that same shear as on the nusach of the shtar itself. So for instance, if the nusach of the shtar was 6 points or 6 millimeters for each line, and the 6 millimeter blank in front and the 6 millimeter blank below, so that's a total of 18 millimeters, that would be a line. That's not the case. It's not the case by the Eidim. So I said a moment ago, it's exactly the same spacing as would be written in the shtar. But now we're going to say it's not so. Because Shneshit and Sha'amru, it's the Ksav Yidei Eidim, below Ksav Yidei Sefer. Seifrim are skilled, they can write even clearer in a smaller font. But Eidim, their signature will always be bigger than the font of the writing of the shtar, because they're not as precise. They're not Seifrim. It's not their trade. They don't write as well. And therefore, in order to be Mezayif, you're not going to have the Seifer being Mezayif. It's going to be a regular guy. I'm sorry? So because of that, in order to be able to add in lines, it would have to be a bigger line, which would be more appropriate for the line for the Aiden design. So instead of being a 6-point line, it might be an 8-point. My timer, the Cholam Mizayif, Lav Lagavri Safra Ozil Mizayif. No one's going to go to the Sefer who writes stores and ask him to write in something false. His professionalism would never let him do that. And therefore, the line that we're talking about is not a line equal to the line in the shtar. It rather would be equal to the line that the Eidim would sign on. As Mati says, the size of the box, that would be the height of the line. Zok to Rashbam, my time, called the Mizayif Lav Gabi Sefer Ozil.
What kind of thing is called the Mizayif Lav Gabi Sefer? They don't go to that either.
Right, but they're writing, but it means it's not a professional person writing, it'll be an amateur person writing. So the amateur person will write in the same size as the Eidim. So Dr. Rishbam, Kol B'Zayif Lav L'Gabi Sofer Hazel, Ulay Lo Yoy V'Loy, V'Lo Yishma Elav, L'Irui Nafshe. Why would a Sofer want to tarnish himself by participating in this ziyuf? Elo Oisa B'Tzin of a Seif Beisa. The owner of the shtar is going to do it by hand. Your average homeowner, your average person dealing with his shtar cannot write so beautifully and so clearly. Okay, now we need to know the spacing. Vichama, what is exactly the spacing that we're going to leave in between lines? Zok Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yitzchok ben Elazar, Kagoin Lech Lecha Ze Al Gav Ze. So I actually wrote it out because it'll be much simpler to show you than it will be to explain it. So here's what we have. Can everybody see my show and tell? So you have lech lecha. So lech lecha is a unique word because the lamed extends up to the line above and the endechaf extends down to the line below. So what would you do if you would line up the chaf of the first lech lecha to be right above the lamed of the next lech lecha? So you would need to leave two blank lines because otherwise the raised part of the lamed will bang in to the lowered part of the endechaf. So that means it's a total of one line and two lines for the ksiva, but either one needs a line in front and a line below. It's a total of 6 lines, right? So it's 2 lines of writing and really another 4 lines of spacing. So I'm going to see over here. So that's this lech lecha over here. So there has to be two lines really left in between the first lech lecha and the second lech lecha, one for the leg of the chaf to come down and one for the arm of the lamed to go up. So zokt the Gemara kohen lech lecha ze al gav ze alma. Based on that, Kasavri must hold that shnei shitin var bo avirin. It's the two lines that the core of the letter would be written on, but then there would be a line above and a line below per line of writing because of the chaf that extends down and the lama that extends up. But who said that you can't adjust it a little bit so that the lamed going up shouldn't bang into the chaf going down, and maybe those two things could share a line. So kagoyin lamed milamaila v'chaf milamata alma kasaver shnei shitin u'shloi shavirin. And that's demonstrated with this one. Here's the first line. Here's the first line over here. You have your lech lecha, and your chaf goes down. But by shifting it over, the raised lamed could be beside the long chaf, and they could share. So you have one line and two lines of writing, and 1, 2, 3 lines of blank. So instead of having 6 lines of total space, you only need 5 lines of total space. And Rabbi Vo Omar could go in Baruch ben Levi b'shita achas. Rather, you could write in one line Baruch ben Levi, kasover shita achas u'shnei avirin. You just need one line and 2 avirin, which is basically like this by itself. So therefore, you can always share an upper and a lower. So every line every 2 lines of writing really only need another 2 line, only 1 line in between them to share the space in between them. So therefore, it's much tighter. So let's see the Rashbam on the last one. Baruch ben Levi. Shnei avirin ikacha. There's only 2 blank lines. Echad l'mayla b'shvil lamed Levi. One above because of the lamed of Levi. Echad l'mata and one below b'shvil chaf to Baruch. But they can all share. They can all share that space. So this is the most chumrah kashita because this says that even a shorter, smaller space would be enough to passel the star if it was left blank. Amarav lo yishanu ella bein edim l'ksav. This that we say that if you left 2 blank lines, that the star is puzzle. That's only after the main nusach of the star. There were 2 blank lines left that were, and exactly what that is, we just discussed how it would be configured. And then the Edom sign. So in those 2 blank lines, someone could have filled in some extra information. But Abel ben Edom la Shrasa, afilu tuva nami kosher. But underneath the Edom signature, there would normally be left a blank part of the star. And in that blank part of the star, the Bezdin would write, once they are Makayim the star, the Bezdin will write, we took the star and analyzed it and checked out Edom, and we can verify that this star is legit. And then the Bezdin will sign. Then the Bezdin will sign on their ashrasa. So it'll be a second little paragraph and then the second signature. So that we say that 2 lines of blank space will passel, that's between the Edom and the Ksav. But if it's between Edom and Ashrasa, and there's 2 ways to explain this, I'm going to try to explain it one way and see how it flows through the sugya. Under the Edom that's signed, before they write the Ashrasa, if they left space there blank, that could also be filled in, there, afilu tuva nami kosher. No matter how much space you leave there, it's not a problem. And the concern is, as the Gemara is going to ask, Mashna ben Edom l'ksad, Dilma mezayif v'kosav, why don't you want to leave a large gap between the Edom and the Ksav of the star? Because someone could fill in those lines and cause a forge. The cost of my deboy v'chasimi sahadi, and then they'll have the Edom sign, or the Edom sign. Well, then ben Edom l'ashrasa nami. If there's a blank space left between the Edom and the ashrasa, nami mezayif v'kost of my deboy v'chasimi sahadi. If you leave a lot of space in between the Edom of the star and the text of the Eshrasa, you could write a whole new star in there and fake Adim, and no one's going to bother to be Mekayim those Adim because there's the Eshrasa the Daini. It's already a certified star. So you could literally cut off the top of the star. You have enough space to write a whole new star with forged Adim, but no one's going to check up on those Adim because right below that forge, Bezdin already certified that star. So why isn't that a problem? Zakta Gemara, Dimitayit lei. You know what they have to do in that blank spot? They have to put dots or little letters on it. In other words, they have to show that it's not free and clear. So they have to put dots on it that will indicate that you can't write there anymore. Ihachi fragt the Gemara, what's this whole big deal about leaving a blank line or two blank lines after the Nusach Ashtar until the Edim? Why don't you do the same thing there? Ben Edim l'shtar nami mitayitle. Between the Edim and the star, maybe as well. You should just make some dots and lines and stuff like that so nobody could fill in any more information. Zok to Gemara, and this is where I'm going to have a little bit of difficulty. Amri sahadi atayuta huda chasimi. You know what you might say? What you might say is the Edim that signed are not signing at all on the star. They're signing on those dots. And so the struggle that we're going to have to work out, what do you mean you're signing on those dots? Doesn't say anything, right? So we're going to have to work that out in a minute. So, and we'll see that in a second. We'll get back to this in a second. That's what people are going to say. Maybe when the Bezdin side at the bottom, maybe they're also referring to those dots and not referring to their kiyum. Bezdin don't sign to verify dots. They don't do such a thing. And Adim who are not as learned, because they're not Bezdin, they might sign for something like that. But Bezdin wouldn't. So if Bezdin signs, even if there's dots, we know Bezdin is signing on the important information that they wrote on the Kiyum Ashtar. Okay. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at the Rashbam, the Metayitlei. You make it dirty with ink. I'm not sure that Tosfos agrees to this exactly, because I didn't touch it, you just make it dirty. I touched it that they actually put dots and things on it, and we'll see in a second why. But once it's dirty with ink, now you can't write anything on it because it's already imprinted. But if a hemper came to us, it will be possible. In other words, it's only kosher if that space was filled in. Because if it was left blank, it was not done ketikun chacham. But atiyut chasimi edim, if there was a blank space between the nusach ashtar and the edim, and that was scribbled over in ink in that blank space, there we would have a concern, and the star still wouldn't be good, because maybe that's what they're signing for. Veloya ikush star. Kidarim begitin. Chashina were concerned. Shema asha'ela shalom shekasav b'shtar chasmu. Let's say there's a star written, and in the star says, "Oh, it was so nice to see Reuven," and then it says, "And I saw Reuven borrow money from Shimon," and then Edom signed at the end. Where Chash, and maybe the Edom are just signing that Reuven wants to say hi, but not on the actual transaction of the star. V'lo ekush star. So Hakanami, if there's dots and markings on the star, Kach me'idin b'fanenu atayit b'diyoy. Maybe they're saying Edis on that. I'm not sure what there is to say Edis about that. Oh, I'm very happy that that's what you said, because that's exactly what I think it's referring to. But you can't say that that's what they're signing on, because the whole point is we're saying that if they signed that, they might have signed it. There's nothing written there, but that means they're signing on the star. The nimchak, and I don't even know what the lashon harishpa means. Hakanami kach meidin b'fanenu atayit. Maybe they're just signing on that picture or whatever it is you're going to write there. B'dayoy. And the nimchak, and it got wiped out. Like, I'm not sure what's happening over here. Kidei shelo yechshedu b'bal hashtar. So they shouldn't be choshid that the bal hashtar did something wrong. So I guess by making these dots there, it will show, it'll give it a level of security that the bal hashtar couldn't have filled anything in. But the Bezdin, when they have such a marking, we know for sure that that's not what they're signing on, because Bezdin Atiyuta ain't darken lachtan. They won't sign for something like that Anybody could sign a star, even that non-merchant, they might not realize that that you don't sign a nonsense. But see, Tosfos gives us a little bit more insight. So let's see Tosfos the Matai play. So in the between the blank, in the blank between the star and what the Edom are signing on, you make dots so that no one could fill in anything else there. So Zok Tosfos, Pirush Rabbeinu Tam, B'nekudos Oishuros. You don't just make it dirty with ink, like I think the Rashbam says. Rather, you have to make dots or lines. It had to be for sure man-made. Shenikir, that you could tell, hacholok ma'at. So you can actually see that it's not completely black like you painted it over. Rather, you make dots so you see markings, but you see blank, clear paper in between. So shenikir hacholok ma'at. Sha'oz nicker, because then you'll be able to tell Shaleimochak Meikara that this star didn't have something written on it and was then rubbed out. If you just made it dirty and painted it with ink, then nicker imhoya shamechek imloy, and then we wouldn't know if there was something written there that was wiped off or not. And nevertheless, you do machshir star. So if there's dots over there, you know that's what was there and nothing else, because there's dots, and in between the dots, it's clear white paper. You know nothing else was ever written. Problem is, if you had some dirty ink there, and there was no clear white paper in between the dots of the ink, so then we have another concern that we're going to delve into a little bit more as the Gemara continues today. Because then imken yitashtes kol star legamri, v'gama edim shalamata. What would stop him from making the entire star dirty? And then the yichtov star begillion shalmaila. Then he could write a whole new star in the upper margin of everything. V'yizayif edim, and be mizayif edim v'ashurasa shalmata makaiman. So imagine if it's just making it dirty, you can make the whole star dirty, and then what you could do is the top margin above everything on that star, write a whole new star with Edom, and that's if that just dirt is considered blocking the line, then you have at the bottom you have the kiyum of the bezdin, and everything in the middle is dirty. That won't work. Therefore, what you have to do is dots there, so it's clear that there's no option that there could be a mechet. And then you can write a whole new folding star, in the top margin, you can write a whole new star. And he'll forge Edis, but no one's going to check those Edim because the Ashuraso Shalmata Mekayemes, I said. There's a key on the bottom of the star. And even if there is no margin on top, the Yeshita Akas, by the Edom Aksav, and there's even one line between the Edom and the Aksav, Yichtay Vashtar, Ve'edim Ba'isashita. You can write a whole star just on that one line. I owe it, Yankel, $1 million. And the first Edom will make them dirty. And therefore, Ashurasa Mekayemes, Be'edim Shazayib, and the Ashurasa will be Mekayim to fake Edom. Lahachi Tzarek Lefarish Tiyut is on the Kudus Ashuras. You can't just make it dirty with ink. That's dots where it's clear in between the dots what's going on, that it's clear that in between the dots it was clear white paper, and that lessens the chance of forgery. Okay, so Zok to Gemara Vayter. So it's just a little funny what would mean the Edom are signing. Unless it means the Edom maybe were signing on something that was there, it was once cut up, I'm not sure. But we are cautious that if there is Tiyut and the Edom sign below the Tiyut, we're afraid that the Edom are not testifying to what actually is written in the star. Rather, the Edom are only testifying to what was written over there that might have been erased. Okay, gewaltig. So Zog to Gemara. So far we have Rav Shita that it's less chomerdik when you talk about the Ashrasa Dadaini. There we're not concerned about blank spaces. There we don't have a concern of blank spaces if there's dots in the blank space. Frank Gemara v'leichos dilma gayis la la'ela. Why don't we be concerned that someone will cut off the first star completely, and now there'll be these dots, and then under the dots will be the hiyum. He'll erase all those dots because of my debay, he'll write his own new star in the place where the dots were on dirty cloth. Umachdim sahadi, and he'll get fake Adam, or he'll sign himself fake Adam, and nobody's going to question it because they'll see the kiyum below. Is such a star good? The Rav said, star haba hu ve'edov alamecha kosher. If a star comes to your hand and it's clear that this cloth was written on and erased, because you could tell, but if the Adam and the star are written on the same surface, so we don't care if it was erased before. What's the big deal? It was erased before, and on the cloth that was once erased, you have the star written and the Adam written. They're still written on the same type of surface. So that would be a legitimate star. So that would cause a huge problem here, because by erasing the dots, the tiyuta, you could then write a whole new star. Yes, it will look like you're writing on an erased piece of cloth, but according to Rav, that's perfectly legit as long as the Adam are signed on that same cloth. In other words, imagine if the whole Nusach HaShtar was written on something that you could tell was erased, and you rewrote it, and then all the way at the bottom, the Adam are written on fresh cloth. Then you know something's wrong, because obviously there was something else written and you changed it. But if the Adam are also signed on that same surface, so what's the difference, right? So Zok to Gemara, Hanicha, it would make sense that we don't have to be concerned, and therefore leaving more space before the Kiyam Ashtar wouldn't possibly the Rav Kahana, the Masni law, Mishmei Dishmu. This halacha that Hu Ve'edav Alamechek is kosher, if it wasn't Rav who said it, rather it was Shmuel that said it, Shapir, because our Rav who says you can leave a lot of space before the Kiyum wouldn't hold that halacha. And therefore there's no concern that they'll write a new star on that erased area, because he holds it's not kosher. Elul Rav Tavyumi, the Masni law Mishmei the Rav, but Rav Tavyumi did quote this halacha in the name of Rav, that if the Adam sign on the same type of surface that the star is written on, even though the star was once erased, it will be a good star. Michael Maimer, how could you leave this blank space above the Kiyam star? It could lead to a tremendous forgery. So tomorrow, Kasovar, Rav would hold, Kol ki agavno, ein mekayim oisim nashrasha shavoi, element edim shavoi. It's not a big deal. Rav holds about the star is good if the star and the edus were signed on the same type of surface on the used surface. That is true. It's a good star. But whenever you have a star that's written that way, you have to always be mekayim the edim. You cannot rely on the star having been certified. So that will protect us. Because if someone tries to do that, we're going to ask for kiyum edim. That won't be possible because it's a forgery and the security is still there. Rabbi Yochanan took exactly the opposite perspective as Rav, and he held that for Keret, it's even more chomer leaving a blank line before the Ashros of the dime that we're discussing right here, whether or not you could write a star and chasima on a star that had once been erased. You have to use a clean white piece of paper, or can you use a piece of paper that something was written on and then it was erased? So according to, well, right now we're saying according to both of them, but the Havini of the Gemara was maybe only Shmuel said you could write such a star. Maybe Rav holds that star would be possible. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Lo Shanu Ela Beina Edom L'Chsav. You know where it takes two blank lines to passel a star? That's between the Edom and the Ksav. Aval Ben Edom L'Shrosa. Not only do I disagree with Rav and say that you can leave as much space as you want, I'm saying afilu shita achas pasel. Even one line left blank would pose a problem. Afilu shita achas nami pasel. Why? Why is it that ben edom lashrasa? Why do we say that even one line could be a problem? Because of the following concern: Dilma gayis li'iloi. Maybe someone is going to cut off the entire star and the edom, and there'll be one blank line on the top of this new star, and right below it will be the ashrasa. And what might happen in that blank line? Because of who the edav b'shita achas. Since there's only one line there, he's going to write the star and the edim on one line, right? V'kasovar, and he holds star abah hu ve'edav b'shita achas kosher. to answer Duvi's question. And he would hold that it would be kosher. What else could the concern be? The whole concern that could possibly be is that somebody might write a full star in that one line, and it would be a kosher star. Therefore, you're not allowed to leave even one line blank. That's what he must hold. But if that's the case, ihachi, why don't you have the same concern? Maybe he'll cut off the entire top of the star, entire nusach star, v'chasav in that one line, my boy, v'chasimi sadi, and he'll get Edom to sign. So tomorrow here, there's a bigger problem. You know why? Because savar star abba hu b'shita achas, the Edom b'shita acheres puzzle. If you're just going to fill in the line right above the Edom, and then you're going to leave the Edom there, that's puzzle. That's going to be puzzle. A star that's written in one line, hu ve'edov, that might be kosher. But a star that's written in one line and the Edom are below it, that's puzzle. It's counterintuitive. Well, that's going to be puzzle. Freik the Gemara, okay. But v'leima, v'leichush, but it's not. Because the Rashbam says, there's no minimum size for a star. They're not going to regulate and make a minimum size for a star. Why can't he say that this is a one-line star? There's an 8 below, and because of that you want to apostle the star, because of what we just said. Who b'shita achas ve'edav b'shita acheres puzzle? No. Anol rabbis be'edim hu da'avdi. Really, the Edom are on the one line that I filled in. That there's extra Edom on the next line. I wanted to have extra Edom. We had that before. You could put in puzzle Edom. I wanted to have extra Edom. So now there's still a peril. There's still a peril. So why is it that only one blank line above the Chesimus Edom in a regular star? Why would that not be a problem? Whenever we run into a situation like this, whenever there's funny types of things going on, you'll never rely on the fact that Bezdin was Mekayim that star. That will always require verification independently of those Edom. And therefore, there's no concern. As the Rashbam says, Kol Kagavna Kloimer, Kishayoti Lefanenu Star Haba, Hu Ve'eda V'shita Achas, whenever you have a star where the whole Nusach star and the Edom are in one line, and the Yesh Ba Oid, Tachas Oish Shita Edom Acherim, and the guy is saying, don't worry about those extra Edom, I just wanted to have extra Edom, but validate the star that was written on one line. In such a case, you will not rely on the kiyum that's written below. You're going to have to get those Edom to testify, and since you forged it, that's not going to happen. So based on this, the Tosha says that there's a lot of concerns when you have a star on one line and the Edom on a different line. There's so many different problems. So Tosha gives us a general opinion on the security of stars. So let's have a look at Tosfos, the fourth intermediate line. Hashda dasin lahachi. Now that we've talked all about how easy it is for someone to forge a star to right here to right there, I want to warn you. Hashda dasin lahachi the paslin and oisin star sheyachal zaifinu, a star that leaves any room for ziyuf. We have to puzzle such a star. Imkain sorach lizar ba'oisin stars uksubois. Any star or ksuba, sheyesh lan gilyon, any star that has a margin anywhere, shelo yachsamu ha'edim zeitzel zeh. Two edim should never sign on the same line, because if there's a margin on that same line that they signed, sheyachal lavidul deziyov v'lichtov v'gilyon shebe'orech ha'edim mashayirtza v'hu star haba hu ve'edav v'shita achas v'kosher. Right? You know what could technically happen? If they sign on the same line, then in the margin to the right of it, someone could write any new star that he wants. And that would qualify as a star and Edom on one line, and he can cut everything off. Huh? Enough to write something. But whatever the case is, you have to be careful not to leave any room for someone to be able to fill in. And the yachtach kol ashtar, and he'll cut everything away except for that line. Therefore, that's why in all the stars that we have, it's always one 8 under the other 8. I never knew the reason for that. Technically, it's a wide enough paper. The soup is wide enough. You could have one guy shot on the right, one on the left. But no, you have to have one below the other so that it will never be in one line. So you can never have a star written in one line. Ta'ashta lekalamechish. Now they'll no longer be concerned of forgery. Lekalamechish lamidi the Bach sticks in the imishum sheyichtay begillion star lefnei eight. Because what are we concerned that someone might write in the margin? And this is, listen to this. Listen to what you can write. Forget the second name. The first name. You know what you can do? If you have a guy's name signed and there's nothing in front of it and there's nothing after it, you know what you can write? This is what you can write. Ani ploini hachasum, me. Let's say the aid's name is Reuven ben Yaakov. Me, the person who signs over here, chayiv leploini mana, I owe Reuven a mana. So that would be an IOU note, right? Because your name is written there, and they could fill in. It's literally like giving somebody a blank check. So now it's not talking about false edus. Now it's talking about never sign on the line if there's blank before or after, because somebody could fill anything in. V'havishtar haba, who v'aloive b'ksav yadai b'shita achas. It's the loive himself signing the IOU. Zok to Gemara, that we won't pass the shar, because if you want two separate lines, there's still an up for forgery. The loiva won't be getting messed up, but the aid might be getting messed up, right? So Zok to Gemara, Mishum haloi paslin shtar. It's not a good thing, but we're not going to pass the shtar because of it. The iu ha'aid who the ifsed al nafshei. This aid who signed that way, he messed himself up. Kishu chosam b'mokum shiyachal azayif. He signed in a place where he left himself very exposed. The lichtav alatim ashiyirtu. It allowed anybody to fill in and write about him anything they wanted. But we're not going to pass a shtar because of it. Because that's not a shtar issue. That's a personal risk issue that he shouldn't do. We only pass a shtar if there's a blank line in front of them where it could hurt the subject of the shtar. Because that can hurt the subject of the shtar. We're not going to pass the shtar because the aid might do something stupid that'll endanger himself. But if it's possible to endanger the subject of the shtar, their Chazal jump in and say absolutely not. Avo mishum atzmoi loy the iuhu the afsed nafshi. He should have made a line. He should have protected himself. He should have signed all the way at the beginning of the line. The chaynami im ein gillion b'shtar, and even if there is no margin, lo yechtemu b'soif shita zeitzel zeh. They shouldn't sign at the end of the line and leave the first half of the line blank, because they should make sure that there's nothing to the right of their names. They should sign one below the other. So then Tosfos gets into a whole discussion as to what's considered an integral part of the shtar and what not. Maybe being concerned about something written in the margin wouldn't passel the shtar, because technically it could just be cut off. So Tosfos gets into a whole discussion as to what's the core part of the shtar that we have to be protective over, and what's not the core part of the shtar, that although it's a peril, we won't pass the shtar because of it. Okay, we'll stop here. We'll leave Hashem tomorrow. Yes.